Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive! This week, I continue my series on the archetypes of Shadowrun by talking about Adepts. Adepts are a kind of interesting niche. They are not full magicians. Their magic is extremely focused. And this divides them into three groups. Standard physical adepts, mystic adepts, and what are sometimes called aspected magicians. Of course, I'm going to talk about all three of these and a little bit of what you're going to look at when you're building one. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we talk about the wonderful world of adepts. When adepts were first introduced into Shadowrun, they were extremely focused. Essentially, the first adepts were street Sams, but with magic. I.e., they used magic for equivalent of wild reflexes. They used magic to make their hands able to kill, to do lethal damage. And in fact, you could eventually do it to the point where you were doing deadly damage in the early editions. Increase your soak, stuff like that. And most people continue to think of the standard adept as the physical adept, because that's what they were originally called. Or at least most old-timers like me. Over time, they expanded what adepts could do. Eventually, adepts were able to use their power points, use their magic to perceive astrally, though they can never project. They allow them to boost all sorts of skills. Not just physical skills, but mental and, most importantly, social skills. This led to social adepts being a thing. In fact, one of the most fun characters I ever played was a troll social adept face. We'll get into that later. That's another archetype entirely. But the adept is basically while a magician uses their magic to affect the world outside of themselves, the physical adept uses their magic to channel into themselves, giving them abilities like learning to read people's body postures and, read their telltale signs of what they're thinking, etc. in social situation, move fast, punch through a wall to get the guy behind it without cyberware. One thing in later editions that really came to be a notable thing is that a cybered adept could be terrifying. Because yes, they've lost some of their essence and therefore some of their magic, but in some instances, wear is more efficient than the PowerPoint cost of said powers. For instance, if you play a adept and you have the resources to go ahead and get 2 ranks of synaptic booster or synaptic accelerator, that's going to use less. It's going to lose you less magic or less power points than spending for the adept power improved reflexes, which takes up a huge chunk of your power points. Even later editions, where they kind of adjusted the power points of that, it still is a big investment. Of course, you go pure adept with a full magic of 6, you can actually start off with the highest grade of improved reflexes. Thus start off faster than most starting Street Sams are able to, due to the Nuyen cost and availability cost of high-end wired reflexes, because you're never going to be able to afford a high-end synaptic accelerator or synaptic booster. But, that's the sort of thing I think about with the physical adept. That their magic is internalized. What they call the Mystic Adept was introduced in 3rd edition, late 2nd edition, with a concept called the Magician's Way. And when it was a thing in late 2nd and 3rd edition, and in 4th edition, it worked like this. You had your magic, and you essentially assigned power points to magic for spellcasting, conjuring, etc. You could do everything with that, but every point you assigned there was a point you didn't have for your power points. So if you had a 6 magic, you could have a character who had a 3 spellcasting and a 3 in power points, which you had some powers and some weak spellcasting, but you weren't really good at either. Of course, 5th and later, they changed it up. They actually went with, you've got the full magic. You just had to pay for the power points to do anything. And you paid for power points up to your rating. Up to your magic rating. That was how they balanced it in 5th edition. Note that what you paid for as a Mystic Adept in 5th edition onward, you could not just pay karma to increase that later. You could only increase those power points via initiation, taking that in lieu of a meta magic. And so that was kind of a little bit more balanced and a little less, well, frankly, less paperwork. Of course, the third type of adept is what's commonly called the aspected magician. These were, you could perceive astrally, and you could do one set of magical skills. Sorcerer, you did spellcasting, counterspelling, and ritual spellcasting. Enchanter, you did alchemy, enchanting, and disenchanting. Conjurer, conjuring, binding, dispelling. And that was it. So you could see astrally, and you could do one group of spells, or one type of magic. A variant on this was called the Shamanic Adept. They could do astral perception. They could cast the type of spells that their totem gave them as a benefit. They gave them a bonus to. And they could conjure the spirits that their totem gave them a bonus to conjure. Nothing else. And frankly, I've never had much experience with these because it's like I'm paying all the benefits to be something else and paying the points to be something else, but I'm not getting all the perks of that. So, why? And from what I understand, there were very few people who generally played a aspected magician or a shamanic adept. But when you look at building an adept, you want to look at what you do. You don't want to build an adept who does a whole bunch of things not very well. Adepts, more than any other archetype, have to be specialized. If you're going to play a social adept, you're going to want to pump in your powers, predominantly boosting your social skills, giving you bonuses to social rolls or to your social limits. Although I am going to say it's always worth taking that first rank of improved reflexes at 1.5 power points in 4th anniversary and onward. It's just worth it no matter what you do, just to have the extra boost to initiative. Because, well, frankly, starting initiative means you never get to do anything. The Street Sam will either go first, then second, then third, then fourth, and then maybe you get to act in 2nd edition, or you'll get to act once, and then the Street Sam gets to act again and again and again. So it's generally better to always have a little bit of a bump to initiative, even if it's only ever likely to get you a second action, just because it gets you to act twice at least. But if you're building a combat adept, you're going to want to look at the various... What type of combat adept? Are you going to be a gunslinger? Then you want to pump up your reaction, your agility. Temporarily got systems crossed there. It happens when you have so many that you're familiar with. So, if you're building a combat adept, a gunslinger adept, you want to bump up your agility. You want to bump up your gun skill. And of course, you want to bump up your initiative. If you're building a barehanded adept, oh boy, this is where you get all the fun stuff. You can give yourself elemental strike, so that when you punch someone, you're punching them with electricity. You can make your punch go through armor. You can make it penetrating strike. You can increase the chance of it knocking someone down. And of course, you can make it do lethal damage with the mandatory killing hands. Because seriously, all your powers that bump up your physical ability require killing hands. And that's the thing. When you build a adept, you have to look at your specialty. Something else to remember is in 5th and 4th edition, adepts could take mentor spirits. These mentor spirits give adepts a power and a bonus to a skill. But the important part is they give ranks of power. 5th edition introduced a new type of focus. Foci are basically magical items that previous editions, Adepts only cared about one foci. The weapon foci. Because these were your magical swords, could hurt spirits, and oh boy, they did extra damage. Mystic Adepts kind of also liked power foci and sustaining foci, just because of the benefits for them for magic, i.e. they increased their effective magic rating for the power foci, and sustaining foci let them sustain a spell without having to actually put the effort into sustaining it. In earlier editions, these were called spell locks. But 5th edition introduced a new type of foci that is a thing every adept probably loves. The key foci is spelled QI. And what these foci did is, you would get one of these foci, and it gave you a power. Each rating of it gave you 1/4 of a power point. So a rating 4 key foci could have 1 power point's worth of powers to it. So maybe you put something like Elemental Strike Fire and Penetrating Strike in a tattoo key foci on your arm. Maybe you had a jug that maybe was filled with sake, maybe it was filled with wine, maybe it was filled with water. You don't know, or no one else knows. That was your method of using improved initiative. Bumping your initiative up a few levels. Not to be confused with improved reflexes. Anything like that would be a key foci. And it would be a way to, if you already knew a power, it would add ranks to that power. So if you already had, for instance, ranks of Mystic Armor, and then you took a key foci, you could add more ranks of Mystic Armor. And then you have the fun thing where you take a bear, you are a adept, you take bear as your mentor spirit, so you get 2 free ranks of Mystic Armor. You take ranks of Mystic Armor, and then you take a key foci of improved body, or more Mystic Armor, whichever you prefer. And you reach the point where it's like, I really hope, because you have bear, which means if you take physical damage, you go berserk, I really hope you never take physical damage, because none of us have the firepower to knock you unconscious, or even hurt you. Yes, that actually happened in one of my groups. And finally, you have to just think about what you're going to fit in, what you're going to do. Because, and here's the thing, Adepts have the most potential for growth, because an Adept takes an initiation, gets a power point. Takes an initiation, gets a power point. Takes an initiation, gets a power point. More powers. Eventually, it just gets crazy for them. But that is it for Adepts. Next week, I'm going to go ahead and talk about one of the more unusual but essential roles in the Shadowrun team. The face. So until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.